Okay, so you want to own a coffee shop. You can already see it. Morning light coming in sideways through the front window, hitting the steam rising off the espresso machine. There's a low hum of conversation, the hiss of the steam wand, the smell of fresh ground so thick you can almost chew it. You know the regulars by name. There's the writer in the corner who orders the same flat white every day. There's the couple who got engaged at that little table by the wall. You put on a record, you wipe down the counter, you make something with your hands that makes strangers happy. It's calm, it's yours. And at the end of the month, the money just quietly rolls in, because everybody drinks coffee, right? Everybody. It's a machine that prints small, warm profits while you live the life of a beloved neighborhood fixture. That's the picture. That's what the movies sell you. That's what the Instagram cafe tour and the "I quit my corporate job to open a cafe" blog posts sell you. Here's the problem. Roughly half of these places are gone within 5 years. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, about half of all new businesses don't survive past their 5th year, and food service runs harder than average because the margins are razor thin and the mistakes are expensive. The writer in the corner nursing one $4 coffee for 3 hours? He's not your best customer. He's occupying a seat you're paying rent on. The engaged couple? Lovely. They come back once a year. That warm smell of fresh grounds is also the smell of inventory you paid cash for that will go stale in 2 weeks. And that machine that prints money is actually a machine that eats money, labor, milk, rent, repairs, spoilage, every single hour, whether a customer walks in or not. So let me give you the reframe that this entire video is built on. A coffee shop is not really a coffee business. It is a real estate and labor business that happens to sell coffee. Read that again. The coffee is the easy part. The coffee is almost never the part that kills you. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly where every dollar goes, why the drink that costs you 60 cents to make is the least of your worries, why the busiest cafe on the block can still go broke, and why the people who actually get rich in coffee are usually not the ones standing behind the counter. You'll understand the one counterintuitive mechanism that separates the shops that last from the shops that become an empty storefront with brown paper over the windows. Let's get into it. Before we talk about money, we need to talk about what a coffee shop actually is. Because coffee shop is one phrase hiding at least 4 completely different businesses, and people who blur them together lose their savings. Some are what I'd call the third place cafe. That's the term the sociologist Ray Oldenburg made famous. A third place being somewhere that isn't home and isn't work, where people just gather. Comfy chairs, laptops, free Wi-Fi, people staying 2 hours. Some are the grab-and-go, high-throughput shop, a tiny footprint near a train station or an office tower, no seating to speak of, in and out in 90 seconds, all about volume. Some are the drive-through coffee stand, no dining room at all, just a booth and a menu board and a line of cars, which is quietly one of the most profitable formats in the entire industry. And some are really roasters wearing a cafe as a costume. The money is in selling bags of beans wholesale to restaurants and grocery stores, and the storefront is basically a marketing showroom. Here's the trap. The third place cafe, the dreamy one, the one you actually pictured, is the hardest one to make money on. The comfy chairs and the laptop crowd and the 2-hour stay are the exact things that lower your sales per square foot. So for the rest of this, we're going to follow that dream version, the sit-down neighborhood cafe, because that's the one most people want, and it's the one that most needs the truth. Let's talk about getting in the door. The single biggest number people fixate on is the build-out, the cost of turning an empty commercial space into a functioning cafe. And the range is wide. According to industry cost estimates compiled by outlets like IBS World and small business lenders, a modest coffee shop can be open for around $80,000 on the low end if you're taking over a space that was already a food business and keeping it simple. A full sit-down cafe with a real kitchen, custom millwork, seating for 30, and a proper build-out commonly runs $200,000 to $375,000. Go bigger, add a drive-through lane, add a hood and a food program, and you can sail past $400,000 or $500,000 without trying hard. If you franchise a Dunkin', the company's own disclosure documents have put the total investment anywhere from roughly $500,000 to $1.8 million depending on format and real estate. And Starbucks, by the way, won't even franchise to an individual. They own or license their locations, which tells you something about how they think about control and margin. Now here's the lesson buried in those numbers, and it's the same lesson in every one of these videos. The price of getting in and the profitability once you're in are two completely different numbers. A cheap build-out in a cheap location is cheap for a reason. The cheap rent is cheap because nobody walks past it. You can spend 80 grand to open a shop that never had a chance, or you can spend 300 grand on a corner that prints money. The entry cost tells you almost nothing about whether the thing will actually work. Hold on to that. Okay, so let's say you've got the space. Now comes the part nobody budgets for. The hidden infrastructure. The stuff that isn't on the pretty mood board. First, the equipment, and specifically the heart of the whole operation, the espresso machine. A serious commercial espresso machine, the kind that won't die on you during a Saturday rush, is not a small appliance. A two-group La Marzocco or comparable commercial machine runs roughly $10,000 to $25,000. And you can't stop there, because the grinder matters as much as the machine. Good commercial grinders run $1,000 to $3,000 each, and you'll want more than one. Then the espresso machine needs a water filtration system, because the mineral content of your tap water will scale up and destroy an expensive machine, so add a few thousand for filtration. So far so good, except we haven't sold a single cup yet. Second, refrigeration and the cold chain. You need commercial refrigerators, an under-counter fridge for milk at the bar, a freezer, maybe a display case. That's several $1,000s, and here's the part that hurts. Refrigeration runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it's one of the biggest single-line items on your electric bill. You're paying to keep milk cold at 3 a.m. when the shop is dark and empty. Third, the unglamorous plumbing and electrical and ventilation. This is the money pit inside the money pit. Commercial spaces often need upgraded electrical panels to run all this equipment at once. You may need a grease trap. If you're doing any real food, you need a ventilation hood, and a commercial hood installation alone can run $10,000 to $30,000. Then there's the health department compliance, the hand sinks in the right spots, the 3-compartment sink, the specific finishes on the walls and floors. None of it shows up in a single photo of your beautiful cafe, and all of it has to be paid for before you open. Fourth, the soft costs that feel invisible until the invoice lands. Permits and licenses. A liquor license if you want to serve wine at night. Point-of-sale systems and the monthly software fees behind them. Signage. A good exterior sign can be $5,000 to $15,000. Initial inventory. And the one everybody forgets, working capital. You need enough cash to cover payroll and rent for the months before the shop turns profitable, because it will not be profitable on day one. The single most common way these places die isn't bad coffee. It's running out of cash in month 4, before the neighborhood has fully found you. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Here's the core mechanism that recontextualizes this entire business, and I need you to slow down with me for this one. You'd assume the coffee is your main cost. It isn't. Not even close. The actual coffee, the beans in a standard drink, is one of the cheapest things you sell. The espresso in a latte might cost you, in raw beans, somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 50 cents. You sell that latte for $4, $5, $6. On paper, that looks like an incredible markup. It looks like free money. So why is anyone ever broke? Because you're not really selling coffee. You're selling the milk, the cup, the labor, and the seat. Let me break that down. In a typical latte, the single most expensive ingredient is usually the milk, not the coffee. The paper cup, the lid, the sleeve, the straw, that packaging can cost more than the coffee inside it. And then there's the person who made it, who's standing there getting paid whether they make 4 drinks an hour or 40. And behind all of it, every square foot of that cozy room is rent you owe whether the seat is full or empty. So the real math of a coffee shop isn't cheap beans, expensive drink. The real math is this: your cost of goods, beans, milk, cup, syrup, typically run somewhere around 15 to 25% of the drink's price. That part's fine. That part's healthy. It's everything else: the labor, the rent, the utilities, the repairs, the insurance, that eats the rest. And the industry-wide result of all that is brutal. A well-run coffee shop often lands at a net profit margin of only a few percent to maybe the high single digits. Small business analyses routinely put independent coffee shop net margins somewhere in the range of roughly 2.5 to 8%. That means on a shop doing $500,000 a year in sales, the owner might take home somewhere between $12,000 and $40,000 in actual profit for running a 7-day-a-week operation that opens at 5 a.m. That's the counterintuitive heart of it. The product has a fantastic markup. The business has a terrible margin. Those two facts live together, and if you only understand the first one, you will lose your money. Let that land for a moment. So how does money actually come in? Let's break it into layers, because a shop that survives almost never survives on plain coffee alone. The first layer is the base drinks, drip coffee, espresso, the black coffee crowd. High margin per cup, but low ticket. A $2 drip coffee doesn't move the needle much on its own. The second layer, and this is the real engine, is the milk and flavor drinks, lattes, cappuccinos, mochas, and the seasonal stuff. Here's the quiet truth of the modern cafe. The more you turn coffee into a milkshake, the more you can charge, and the higher your total ticket goes. The oat milk caramel drink with an extra shot isn't a betrayal of coffee culture. It's the margin. It's what pays the rent. The third layer is food. Pastries, sandwiches, the muffin next to the register. Food is where a struggling cafe goes to find breathing room, because the average ticket jumps when someone adds a $7 breakfast sandwich to their $4 coffee. But food is also a trap if you do it wrong. It spoils, it's labor-intensive, and a croissant you bake and don't sell by end of day is just money in the garbage. The fourth layer is retail and beans, bags of your own roasted coffee, branded mugs, gift cards, the merch. Low volume, but high margin, and it's basically free advertising walking out the door. And the fifth layer, the one the smart operators obsess over, is throughput and speed. Not a product at all, a rhythm. How many transactions can you push through per hour during the morning rush, because a cafe makes the overwhelming majority of its money in a few hours a day? If your line moves slow, you don't just lose that one sale. You lose every person behind them who saw the line and kept walking. Now let's talk about the recurring bleed. The costs that show up every single month whether you have a good month or a terrible one. Labor is the big one. In a service cafe, labor typically eats around 30 to 35% of your revenue, and it can go higher. Baristas, a shift lead, maybe a manager, payroll taxes, and now, in a lot of the country, rising minimum wages that hit food service directly. Every hour you're open, you're paying people to stand ready for customers who may or may not come. Rent and occupancy is the second monster, and it's usually your second biggest cost after labor. A good rule that operators use is that rent should stay under roughly 10% of your sales, but on a hot corner with the foot traffic you actually need, landlords know exactly what that location is worth, and they price it accordingly. You're often paying several $1,000s a month before you sell a single cup. Then the utilities, and remember the refrigeration and the espresso machine and the lights and the heat, all running long hours. Then repairs and maintenance, because that expensive espresso machine will break, and it always breaks on your busiest morning, and an emergency service call is not cheap. Then insurance, general liability, property, workers' comp. Then the point-of-sale fees and the credit card processing, which quietly schemes a couple % off nearly every transaction you make. And then taxes. Add it all up and you see the shape of the trap. The coffee costs you almost nothing. Everything around the coffee costs you almost everything. Now, here's where it gets dangerous. Let's talk about risk and volatility, because there's a structural threat that can break even a well-run shop. The first is the one you don't control at all, the price of coffee itself, the raw commodity. Green coffee is a global commodity traded on the futures market, and its price swings hard based on weather in Brazil and Vietnam, on frost, on drought, on shipping costs. When a frost hits the Brazilian growing regions, as happened in 2021, global coffee prices spike, and in 2024 and into 2025 coffee futures hit multi-decade highs. You, the little cafe owner, can't just double your latte price overnight without scaring off your regulars. So when your bean cost jumps, your margin, already thin, gets squeezed from underneath, and there's very little you can do about it. The second structural threat is that your revenue is dangerously concentrated in time. A huge share of your money comes in during the morning rush and maybe a lunch bump. That means your whole business can rise or fall on things you don't control. A road construction project that blocks your corner for 6 months, an office tower nearby that goes remote and takes its commuters with it, a new competitor opening across the street. Your rent is fixed. Your traffic is not. When those two things move in opposite directions, the shop bleeds out quietly, one slow morning at a time. And the third is simple market saturation. Coffee is easy to start and everybody wants to. So you're rarely the only option. You're one of 5 within walking distance, and the customer who loves you today will absolutely try the shiny new place next month. Let me tell you a real story about what happens when you get big and still get it wrong. This one is factual, and it's a cautionary tale worth sitting with. In 1992, a man named Tom O'Keefe opened a coffee shop in Seattle. His middle name was Tully, so he called it Tully's Coffee. And this is the important part. Seattle in the early 90s was already Starbucks' hometown. O'Keefe looked at Starbucks and decided he could compete head-on Starbucks' own turf, in Starbucks' own city. Tully's grew fast. Through the late 90s and 2000s it expanded aggressively. Dozens, then hundreds of locations, a wholesale business, bags on grocery shelves, deals to put Tully's Coffee in stadiums and offices. From the outside, it looked like the scrappy local hero taking on the giant. Here's the problem. Tully's expanded faster than it could ever make profitable. Growth is not the same thing as profit. A bigger money-losing business just loses money faster. Tully's struggled to be consistently profitable for years, layering on debt, opening stores that competed with a company that had deeper pockets, better real estate, and enormous scale. And in 2012, Tully's Coffee filed for bankruptcy. Then came the part that sounds like a redemption arc. A group led by the actor Patrick Dempsey, Dr. McDreamy from Grey's Anatomy, swooped in and bought the retail chain out of bankruptcy in 2013 for around $9 million. Save Tully's, the headline said. Dempsey was the hero. But underneath the celebrity glow, the fundamentals hadn't changed. The stores still couldn't reliably make money. There were partner disputes, lawsuits, reports of unpaid taxes and unpaid rent. And in early 2018, the remaining Tully's locations abruptly closed, some of them locking their doors overnight, employees showing up to find the shop shut for good. From a Seattle icon to nothing. So what's the lesson? Tully's didn't fail because the coffee was bad. The coffee was fine. It failed because it treated a low-margin, real estate and labor business like a growth story, expanding into expensive locations against a dominant competitor without ever nailing the unit economics of a single store. It got big before it got profitable. Remember the reframe from the start. Coffee is not really a coffee business. Tully's is what happens when you forget that at scale. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because I've spent this whole time telling you how hard it is. So how do the people who actually win in coffee actually win? Because some do, and spectacularly. Let's talk about the deeper game. The savvy operators figured out something the dreamers never do. The cafe itself is often the least profitable part of the coffee business. The real money lives in the layers around it. The first deeper move is roasting and wholesale. Instead of selling 1 cup at a time to one person, you roast beans and sell them by the pound to other cafes, to restaurants, to grocery stores, to offices. The margins on wholesale beans can dwarf the margins on a single latte, and you're not paying baristas or comfy chairs to move that volume. Plenty of respected coffee companies run their retail cafes essentially as marketing, a living billboard for the brand, while the actual profit engine is the roasting operation in the back. The second deeper move is real estate. Think about what a wildly successful cafe does to the block around it. It brings foot traffic. It makes the neighborhood desirable. The owners who understand this try to own the building, not just rent it, so that as the cafe draws crowds and the area gentrifies, the property itself appreciates. The coffee shop becomes a tool to increase the value of an asset you own. That's not a coffee play. That's a real estate play with a great smell. The third deeper move is systems and brand, turning one good shop into a repeatable format you can license or franchise, and collecting fees and royalties from other people's labor and risk. That's essentially the model the giants run. And it's worth being honest about the biggest one. A lot of serious analysts have pointed out over the years that Starbucks behaves partly like a real estate and financial operation, wearing a coffee apron, locking up prime corners on long leases, moving enormous volume, and even earning meaningful money on all the cash loaded onto its prepaid cards and app, essentially an interest-free float from millions of customers. The coffee is the story. The economics are something else entirely. So the pattern is the same at every level, from the tiny roaster to the global chain. The people who win in coffee mostly win by owning the thing around the coffee, the beans upstream, the building underneath, the brand on top, not by selling one more oat milk latte across the counter. All right, let's bring it all the way home with real numbers. Two versions of the same shop. Same corner, same owner, same beautiful build-out. 1 year apart. The good year. It's a strong location, the office tower nearby is full, the weather cooperates, and your morning rush is deep and fast. You do around $600,000 in sales. Your cost of goods, beans, milk, cups, food, runs about 22%, so call it $130,000. Labor runs about 32%, roughly $190,000. Rent and occupancy take about $60,000. Utilities, insurance, repairs, processing fees, marketing, and the rest of it eat maybe another $140,000. When the dust settles, you clear somewhere around $50,000 to $70,000 in profit for the year, on $600,000 in sales. That's your reward for opening at 5 in the morning, 7 days a week, a solid, respectable, roughly 10% year that most owners would be thrilled to hit. Now the bad year. Same shop. But green coffee prices spiked, so your cost of goods crept up a few points. Minimum wage went up, so labor climbed. And that office tower across the street shifted to hybrid work, so your morning rush thinned out and sales slid to $440,000. Now here's the cruelty of the model. Your rent didn't drop. Your insurance didn't drop. Your refrigeration still ran 24 hours a day. Your fixed costs stayed exactly where they were while your revenue fell out from under them. Suddenly that comfortable 10% profit isn't just smaller, it's gone. You're at break-even, or you're underwater, dipping into savings to make payroll, staring at the same beautiful room full of the same regulars, wondering how a shop this busy and this loved can possibly be losing money. And that's the whole thing, right there, in 2 numbers. Nothing about the shop changed. The coffee was just as good. The lights were just as warm. What changed were the costs around the coffee, the labor, the rent, the beans, the traffic, the parts that were never really about coffee at all. So go back to that opening image. The morning light through the window. The steam off the machine. The regular in the corner with his flat white. It's all still true. It's still one of the most genuinely lovely things a person can build. But now you can see the machinery underneath it, the milk that costs more than the espresso, the rent that runs whether the seats are full or empty, the payroll that starts before the doors open, the commodity price set by Frost in a country you've never been to. The warm room full of regulars isn't really the business. The rent, the labor, the beans, and the building underneath it, that's the business. The coffee was never the business. The coffee was just the reason everybody walked through the door.